One way to speed up your intuitive development is to take a really good look at your personal programming, figure out what you want to keep, what you want to let go. Let's jump into that today.
This is your moment. This is your moment in time. This is your moment.
Let's jump into personal programming. But first, I want to make sure that you've subscribed to the channel, click that notification bell, because I want to make sure you're notified when each of these videos come out. We put them out once a week, and it's all about helping you with your intuitive development. Okay, let's jump in. When it comes to personal programming, there's a couple components here. What is it? What can we do to adjust our personal programming to enhance our intuitive development? And what are we going to see as a result of that? Let's cover all of those today. Let's start with this. What is personal programming? Okay, I'm going to actually back up even further. Before we go there, I want a beautiful disclaimer. Every single person is perfect. Where you are in your life is exactly where you're supposed to be. Where you are headed is where you're supposed to be headed. Where you've landed is where you've landed. You're okay right now. You're going to be okay in a second. You're going to be okay further on. This is not about deciding that anything wrong has happened to you in your personal programming. This is simply looking at how you're wired and if you would like to adjust that. So step into this video knowing we are all perfect. We are all made of unconditional love. Throw the good, the bad out, throw the judgment out. And now let's jump into what personal programming is. Okay, without judgment, with full unconditional love, because that's what this whole channel is about. Our personal programming is what we were taught mostly through childhood, sometimes what we continue to be taught as adults, that creates the patterns and the way that we walk through life, that creates the foundation for the decisions we make, how we choose to receive other people's energy, how we choose to put our own energy out there. A couple of very simple examples of this would be if you were raised to drink tea, but perhaps you're not a coffee drinker. This might be, and this is a very basic example, but this might be exactly what aligns with you. You might love tea. You might think that this, for the rest of your life, that's your drink of choice, is I would like tea. But there might be a day that you only have the option of coffee. So you try coffee and you realize, oh, I like coffee way more. Now, you were raised on tea, but you had a moment out in the world as an adult where you went, oh, wait, I like this more than what I was taught to like. This is personal programming. And that's a super basic example. The more intricate examples of personal programming would be how you're taught to respond. Here's one that might be familiar for you, especially for those that are linked into this channel, because people that are linked into this channel tend to be very compassionate, very giving people. And perhaps there's a little bit of personal programming in there where we might have been taught to be a people pleaser, taught to put everyone before ourselves. I am a recovering people pleaser myself. But that's personal programming, to be taught, again, no judgment on any of the parents or, people involved in the children's lives. No judgment here. We're just talking about what is, where we're at right now and how we want to move forward. But if we're taught to always put ourselves last, that's what we're going to do. That's our personal programming. Programming is a key word here. This is not your spirit. This is not your core. This is not your soul. This is what you're taught to do. This is your programming body, your programming mind. Now, we can also be taught very wonderful things in our personal programming. We can be taught to have compassion. We can be taught to give people the benefit of the doubt. We can be taught how to express our love towards someone. So we can be taught wonderful, incredible things. We can also be taught things that just don't seem to line up. Now, fast forward, as an adult, you're running into walls. You can't seem to get ahead. Things just aren't unfolding for you. And sometimes, most of the time, actually, you've hit a point in your life where your personal programming doesn't match your spiritual path. And the result of that is you just feel like you are colliding with everything. Why isn't this working? Why aren't things working themselves out? And this can be because while your spiritual path unfolded, you might not have been able to catch up a little bit on adjusting your programming, that personal programming. Again, no judgment. You're perfect exactly where you are. But let's get us on a smoother spiritual path. Now, one thing to consider is this, and this is when we think in terms of bigger concepts, sometimes it helps us to take a little bit of our self-judgment off of ourselves. Think of this. Every person on earth lands somewhere different. Okay. I landed in California. I was born in California, United States. Somebody else was born in India. Somebody else was born in Russia. Somebody else was born in Australia. Somebody else was born in China. All of us have very different personal programming because all of us landed in very different cultures. So some cultures have, always do this. And some cultures say, no, don't ever do that. When we look at the bigger picture, what I want you to take away from that is your childhood, your personal programming, where you landed, the culture you grew up in is not wrong. There's nothing wrong about it. It's just where you landed. It was your development. And now here you are today. So I never really encourage people to look back and judge. I always encourage them to look within and say, what would I like to adjust? Now, with that said, yes, healthy boundaries are awesome. Therapy, yes, any sort of inner work you can do is going to help your intuitive development as well. But just looking at this one piece of personal programming, I always recommend to disconnect from the judgment and emotions of the past and of others, and instead say, where do I want to be? And start to look inward and focus on the changes within. Because we don't need another person's okay or authority in order to make choices on our own personal programming. Now, before I step into some of the techniques that we can use to adjust our personal programming to fit our spiritual path, I want to reiterate that when we do this, when we explore our personal programming, we really expand our access to our intuitive channel. Now, your intuitive channel is natural, normal, strong. Everyone has it. It's not a special factor. One person isn't super intuitive versus somebody else. We all are wired with strong intuitive channels. Now, just because we're wired doesn't mean we have access to that channel. It could be very cluttered. What is clutter? I'm kind of giving you a very short summary here of getting to why personal programming can enhance your intuitive development when you work through it. Clutter is emotional, environmental, mental, relationship clutter. That clutter blocks the channel. So the more we're not in line with who we really are, who we are at a soul level, the more we're unaligned from that, the more clutter we have. I hope that makes sense. Another way to say that is if we're continuing to do things out of our personal programming that don't align with our core, our spirit, then we're continuing to create more clutter in the form of stress, in the form of discontent, in the form of disruption, in the form of just piling it on with stress. So personal programming that doesn't align with our intuitive channel, with our spirit, with our core, causes clutter. That clutter blocks your intuitive channel. It's harder to get intuitive information. Thus, work on the programming body. It releases some of the clutter, sometimes slowly but surely, but hey, start somewhere, right? It releases some of that clutter. And when that clutter releases your channel, you have more access to that intuitive channel. You have more access to intuitive information. So moving forward, by taking a good look at your programming, your personal programming, deciding what you want to keep and what you want to let go, you are decluttering your personal programming. You're decluttering in your emotions and your environment and your relationships and things like this. By starting to make these choices that are more in line and more authentic to you, you're allowing yourself to not carry what you shouldn't carry. Let me give you an example. Let's talk about people pleasing again. I was taught to help everyone else. While that's not necessarily a bad thing at all, I really went far with it. So that was my pattern. That's where I was at. And for me, when my first reaction is to say yes to what everybody else wants and put myself second, every time I do that, there's a little bit of bitterness, like a little nugget of it that clutters up. That just, and every choice that I make that doesn't align with me, with what works, with my path, and with what I really want to do, every time those choices are made out of personal programming, out of that habit, out of this is what you do, okay, this is what I have to do, the result is a little bit of bitterness. And that little bit of bitterness is a piece of clutter. And we bottle it up and we carry it with us. Sometimes we can do, GCP, ground clear, protect, and things like that. And that helps a little bit, but it's always better to rework your programming in such a way that you're making choices that align with you. That's always a better choice than to make choices that do not align with you. Get the clutter. Now you got to remove the clutter, back to square one. So this process alleviates a lot of stress, a lot of baggage that we're carrying moving forward, and allows you to make choices that are honorable to you, to your spirit, to your core. Does this mean we are saying no to everyone all the time? No, it means that we're inviting ourselves to be a part of the equation when it comes to making the decision. By doing that, there's no bitterness. We knew that we took ourselves into consideration in addition to everyone else, and then we made the decision that really, really worked for us and for others. And we move forward with that. Now we're not carrying, the negative energy around the outcome of making a decision based on personal programming. We've now made a decision based on alignment, and we're not adding to that clutter. This decision that you make most often is probably going to be, yes, I'll help, because that is who you are. It's not, it's not that just because you were taught you always have to put yourself second, doesn't mean you're going to turn around and always put yourself first. You're too compassionate of a person to do that. You want to help. You just stepping in now to adjusting your personal programming so that you help when it's right for the highest good of all, including you. The result of this, no clutter, no emotional clutter, no emotional baggage added on within here, within your energetic system. And as a result, your intuitive channel opens more. Now, let's get some exercises together here. Let's talk about what can we do to do this. Everyone's different. You hear me say this all the time. Everyone is different. Everyone is unique. Some tools will work well for you. Some tools will not work well for you, but they might work well for somebody else. So I always like to throw out a couple of examples because something's going to stick. Something's going to work really well for you while something else might not. So let's think up a couple of these. When it comes to your personal programming, I always suggest starting with going back and thinking, and thinking over what you were taught. Okay, I was taught that I like tea. We're going to go with the easy one first. I was taught that I like tea, and that's what I drink every day. And now I get to sit with that and really be with that to say, do I like tea? Do I really like tea? You might. Or you might find that if you sit there and you review the last time you drank tea, you thought to yourself, meh, and you might try something else. If you find a personal programming item fits with you, keep it. It's not like we were taught everything that didn't align with us. Most likely half, if not more, of the things that we were taught perfectly line up with us, but sometimes they don't. And that's where step one is to acknowledge that it doesn't line up with you. I can't express to you how big that is. I cannot put words to how big it is, energetically, life-changing, spiritual path level big. it is for you to look at a piece of your programming and say, that does not align with me. That is the beginning. That is the beginning of a completely new way of being. That's the beginning. You just crack the door to happiness open by saying it, by acknowledging it, because I bet you can relate to this. I certainly can relate to this. Part of personal programming is running on automatic. You run on automatic and then you look back and go, oh, you run on automatic and you go, oh, why did I do that? Why do I keep doing that? It can be so strong and so automatic that even something that you're slightly aware that you do that you don't want to do, you still keep doing it. And it's not until after that you look back and go, oh, I don't want to do that. I was recently talking with someone and they were working really hard to set boundaries with a friend that was just taking all of their time up 24/7 and not, it was a very unbalanced situation. And they said, oh, yes, I set this boundary that I don't want to talk to anyone after 9 p.m. But then in a few sentences, you hear them saying, well, and then last night she called at 10 o'clock at night and I answered, even if we become aware of this, taking the steps to adjust our personal programming can take time. We can't be hard on ourselves. We are literally going up against a pattern that we've been doing for a very, very long time. And sometimes that awareness takes a little bit of time to really sink in. That's when in the conversation, the question was, you answered the phone at 10, but I thought the boundary was at 9. And you could hear the person say, wow, yeah, I see how I let that. So even with the awareness, it's going to take time to restructure that programming. But again, the biggest piece of this is the awareness. The biggest piece of this is the acknowledgement. Wow, I don't like tea. Actually sitting with it and going, wow, I really don't like tea. And some of these can be hard. Some of these can be difficult to look at. Some of these can be, a little upsetting. And we'll go with the people pleaser one. When you finally sit down and look at your programming, look at how things unfold around you, look at how you react in situations, and you realize that perhaps you let yourself walk on, see how we can use those words, let ourselves, or you allowed yourself to say yes, or you did. This is where we need to sit down and say, okay, it's not that I'm allowing myself to get taken advantage of, allowing myself to get walked down, allowing myself to get abused. This is linked into my personal programming. This was part of how my pattern unfolded through my life to where today I automatically react like this. Sitting down and allowing yourself to have that awareness is deep and healing. It can be tough because it can invite feelings of self-judgment. Oh, what did I say in the beginning? You got to let that go. Got to let that go. This is not about judgment. This is not about judgment. This is about wearing a blue pair of shoes and deciding you want to change them to a yellow pair of shoes. No judgment on the color of shoes. You just don't want blue now. You want yellow. So let's just move forward to keep processing through how you want to adjust that personal programming. So the first step, awareness, sitting down and saying, okay, I do this and it makes me uncomfortable, or this is something that I do on a regular basis that I just don't know why I do it, or I come away frustrated because it unfolds that way. Give yourself time to explore that. And then give yourself time to rewrite the story. Moving forward, what does this look like? When the invitation pops itself up again, how do I respond? What do I do? Let's go back to the simple one. The wait staff walks up to you in the restaurant and says, would you like tea? Your personal programming goes, yes. And then you go, wait a minute. I decided to adjust my plan moving forward. And you say, not today. I'd like coffee instead. And you start making that adjustment. It's going to take time. These are patterns. A little bit of self-love goes a long way with this. Okay. Because I'm pretty sure you're not 4 years old right now watching this video, which means however old you are, you have all those years of that pattern. And now you're going to step into the next one. So love yourself through this, be gentle through this, but find the patterns that don't work The patterns in your personal programming that don't work bring emotional clutter to your intuition. Find the patterns in your personal programming that don't work, identify them, write them down perhaps, stick them on your bathroom mirror to say, I'm changing. I'm no longer going to put myself last. I'm going to give myself 30 minutes to make decisions, to make sure that I'm also included in the decision. This is how I want to move forward. I'm going to look at all the beverage choices before I decide if I want tea that day or not. Whatever this personal programming is. Step 1, identify it. Step 2, decide how you want to move forward. How are you more aligned? What does your core want? What does your spirit want? Let go of any statements in the past and create your own statements moving forward. Create patterns, create reminders, and take your time with it. Don't put pressure on yourself to just, switch it from one to the other. No, I never do that again. Give yourself time, give yourself patience, give yourself a moment of adjustment. What I will also say, that hands down is my favorite tool when it comes to personal programming. Identify, love yourself through it, decide the direction you're going to go with it, and start creating new patterns. Another way that is really fun to explore your personal programming is to step out of your box. Try something you've never tried before. And it doesn't have to be skydiving, all right? We don't have to jump off a cliff here, but try something you've never tried before. Allow yourself to have moments of inspiration that bubble up to say, gee, I wonder if I would like blah, 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 and then try it. And I'll leave you with an example. My personal programming through childhood was that I was not artistic. I didn't have an artistic bone in my body. That was the sentence that I had heard. No judgment. We're not going back. We're going forward, right? Well, I was in my early 30s and my older son, who was young at the time, said, I want to draw. Take me to the stores, take Michael's and get some drawing stuff. I said, awesome, let's go. So we went and we got drawing journals and pencils for him. And he says, yeah, I want to draw. And he said, I want you to draw with me, Mom. And I said, okay. I'm like, I'll throw some stick figures on a piece of paper. Sure. Why not? You're just hanging out with your kid, having fun. So I got a matching journal. I got matching pencils. And then we came home and we sat down and we opened our journals up and we both started to draw. And I remember looking at, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to draw. Right. And I was looking up and I had a robe that was hanging on the side of a door. And I was like, all right, I'll draw that. I was literally just hanging out with my kiddo and I had no desire to. I had personal programming that very clearly said, you don't have an artistic bone in your body. I drew that robe hanging off that door and blew myself away. I did not know I had the ability to draw so well. I mean, literally no clue whatsoever. And that wouldn't have happened if my kiddo hadn't have said, let's draw, right? And then I remember drawing the dog laying on the floor, and then I drew something else. I drew a plant, and I kept thinking, wow, this is really cool. So it was a hidden ability that I didn't know that I had, and I didn't know that I loved so much. So I've been drawing, I've been painting ever since. I love it. Time falls away when I do it. I just feel blissful, but I had no clue because my personal programming didn't even put that into the equation. So try something new, try something unusual, try something you probably would have never tried before. I don't care, could be jumping on a trampoline. Okay, could be playing marbles. It could be a video game. I don't know. It could be anything, but try something out of the box. Might not click, but it might. I've tried many other things out of the box and I've tried them and went, not my gig, but I tried it. That was cool. But I will never forget that day. It reprogrammed me. It opened up that channel and it said, you do have an artistic bone in your body. And I was able to reprogram that personal programming. It was absolutely wonderful. Very grateful for it. So in summary, my suggestion is to not look back in judgment. Instead, look at where you are right now. Love yourself exactly where you are right now. take a look at the things that bring you stress, that maybe are repeat things, and really identify them. What's my personal programming doing? What am I automatically doing that doesn't align with me? Decide how you want to move forward, decide how you want to change that, and give yourself patience and give yourself time to establish that new programming, one that aligns with your spiritual body. And that way, less emotional baggage, less emotional clutter, more intuitive access to that very strong intuitive channel of yours. Give it a try. It can help. Take one on at a time, perhaps. Don't overwhelm yourself with it. Oh, and don't forget, try something new today. Leave a comment in the section on something that you tried that was new, that really sparked you, that you're excited about, or perhaps a direction that you're headed. We don't want to focus on the negative and the judgment of the past. We want to focus on, where am I headed? Where am I headed? I'll leave you with my comment for the day. I consider my well-being when I make choices.
This is your moment.